Och vi är på. Varmt välkomna allesammans. Welcome everyone. As we look at the geopolitical landscape today, the line between the external military threats and the domestic hybrid warfare has completely dissolved. Yes, we agree. Cyber attacks, disinformation and infrastructure sabotage in the digital era long before any physical conflict begins. And the question is no longer just how many assets do we have, but it's more how fast can our digital systems adapt, communicate, and recover under pressure. And today we are looking at this from three critical lenses. We have the multinational alliances with NATO, we have the national military intelligence right here in Sweden, and we have the civil resilience on the front lines of public safety. And to help us navigate through these lenses, I am so humble and proud to have Thomas Nilsson, Lieutenant General, Head of Military Intelligence and Security, representing national sovereignty and heavy intelligence, and Sweden's rapid integration into NATO. Warm applause for Thomas. We are also fortunate to have Manfred Boudreaux-Dehmer, former CIO for NATO, offering the strategic and the multinational blueprint of how a massive alliance like the NATO handles interoperability and legacy tech. Warm applause.
Thank you.
Yes. And we have Philpott coming here from the UK. He is the Assistant Chief Officer at Humberside Police in the UK, who brings the vital, I would say, total defense and civil security angle into this discussion, showing how AI, public trust, and digital innovation function on the front line of homeland safety. Welcome. Rounding out this panel is Shwan. Miran brings a highly unique, incredibly, I would say, relevant perspective into today's defense discussion. He has spent years on the front lines of Swedish civil security as a police officer. And before transitioning that operational risk mindset into the tech sector, where he has then now spent the last 4 years designing and scaling modern cloud solutions within the Salesforce ecosystem. Warm welcome to Miran as well. Thank you very much for being here. Gentlemen, let's now discuss how we build truly resilient digital capabilities for modern security. And I have some questions prepared for you. And Sweden is now fully adapting to NATO's digital ecosystem, Manfred. From your time as CIO of NATO, what is the single biggest roadblock that nations face when trying to blend their sovereign digital systems into a joint alliance structure? Manfred.
Thank you so much for the question. And let me start off by saying that I'm very, very excited to be here. This is what you built here in Almedalen is something very, very special, very unique, and it is the most beautiful place imaginable to have these very, very open conversations, and it's just a pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me. Now, to your question, Mattias, so I think the biggest obstacle is the fact that every one of the 32 member nations at NATO is really very unique. Each member nation has a unique skill set. And you would see that members who are more advanced technically, they're kind of on one side, but then you've got also some member nations that are maybe not so advanced from a cyber angle or from a technical angle, but then they've got other gifts to bring to the alliance, right? So the biggest issue in adopting technology and then having this harmonization is really the fact that everybody's at a different technical state. And systems as well as networks need to be structured as such where they're very, very, very flexible to account for that, right? Sweden is definitely a very sophisticated nation from a technical standpoint, and so there is a difference, and you need to be able to have connectivity and have data interchange at a different level than other nations. So the diversity of nations is really the biggest issue that we have at a very tangible technical level.
Thomas, I turn to you. How is Sweden navigating that shift right now? And while we are maintaining our strict, national intelligence boundaries, How are we adapting?
Well, I think even if I may be considered to be talking with my own interest, but I will stick out my neck and say we are doing quite good in Sweden. I will also bring our dear friends Finland. Joining NATO and becoming NATO interoperable is going very well. We had a good starting point. We have had what I regard a close partnership, an evolving partnership with NATO since the mid-90s. We have been participating before we become an allied nation. We have participated in NATO-led missions abroad. We have participated in NATO exercises. We have hosted NATO exercises. So I think we had a fairly good starting point compared with some other maybe new members of NATO before, when the enlargement of NATO was going quite fast and in big numbers. So that's a good starting point. We also have, in a way, a level of technological know-how, and we have a Swedish industry in a way. So that's really, really good. So that was not the major problem. I think the problem with interoperability is the same for Sweden and like rest of the nations, for example in NATO, is what would you like to achieve when you have your interoperability? Because interoperability is just a tool, a method. It's a philosophy, or whatever you would call it. I normally take as a comparison, if the European Union decide that we should take a giant leap in our interoperability and regulate that everybody in the union should talk Esperanto, that will do magic things, because we could talk with each other, we could understand, we could read everything. So with that, what should we talk about? What should we write in our papers? So my point is, getting the interoperability is a good start, but you have to bring it to next level. So what should we do with all that? And that also comes up, I assume we will talk about digitalization. But we are interoperable, and we had, as I said, a good start. So that's not a problem. We have proven it several times. So to conclude, we are doing good.
That sounds good. Don't you agree? We all know that carrying, this heavy load, it demands skills, it demands training, it demands technique. And Thomas, you've stated before that private businesses and civil society are the muscle of total defense. So are we really prepared today for what's going on?
In the concept of total defense?
In the concept of total defense, yes.
Yeah. Well, that's hard, and I hope we will never have the ultimate test of that. But I could assure everybody that we are in a much better position compared to what we were for a couple of years ago. We have done a lot of things. We have a defense bill that's actually covering the total defense. We are now in our second year fulfilling that. A lot of agencies are struggling with that. We have increased defense spending, so we have set the political goals, the ambition. And we are, of course, doing it in line of development in NATO. So NATO, of course, have more ideas besides the demands for interoperability. They have operational planning. So NATO is building its capability. They have some plans how to deal with Russia in a collective defense. So all of that we are participating in, contributing. And that goes very well in some areas, and we are struggling maybe in some other areas. That's the same for all the 32 nations. But when I said where could we find the muscles in the society, my point was that you understand my Swedish, even if I talk English, you could find an accent that I'm not from Stockholm. But I always tell people from Stockholm, well, don't think this is Sweden. I tell my teenager son when we were a teenager, this is not Sweden, this is Stockholm. Sweden is something else. So that also goes to the agency. All the muscles, ideas of how to do it is not in a headquarters of an agency, and there are many in Stockholm. Because the real capability, the capacity, the muscles, you will find in private sector, but you will also find it in our municipalities, and if you talk about healthcare, for example, in our regions. So this is why it's so important. So the idea of building a total defense, a whole of society idea, could not be discussed by some people representing the agency meeting in Stockholm or with the different ministerials or whatever. You have to bring in, and that is now happening also rapidly. And I think if you walk around this Almedalen, you could find a lot of tents and events where you could actually see it in real life, how people explain what they have been doing and what they are planning to do. So this is really hopeful.
Thank you for that. Handing over to you, Chris, and into what you're doing in the UK within Humberside Police. You have heavily lended toward modern cloud and AI-driven platforms to manage critical control rooms and citizen communication. How do we ensure that local police, emergency services, and civil infrastructure are digitally integrated into the broader national security picture?
That's a big question,
It is a big question, I know that.
So here in Sweden, you have a national police force. In the UK, we've got 43 individual police forces. So integrating 43 into a total solution is much more difficult because we don't have mandate. We've spoken here about interoperability. We've spoken about integration. Those things are really the building blocks for that integration, and that has to happen. So the things that we've done on a local level and things that we've done in terms of integrating into national platforms and systems have been absolutely reliant on us having an integration platform in place, so that we can leverage the benefits of all of our systems and free up the time of our officers and staff to concentrate on the things that really matter to the public rather than doing general administrative duties.
Interesting. Turning to you, Miran, you have a unique advantage point here as well. You served as a police officer here in Sweden, but for the last 4 years you've been here, in Salesforce ecosystem. From your view, what is the biggest, would you say, practical hurdle to getting Swedish civil security agencies to actually transition away from this legacy silo software into this adaptive, more joint digital platform? What do you see here?
Also a really big and interesting question, but from my perspective, it's not so much about technology per se. What I've seen in my previous work and also where I am today with the customers that I work with within Sweden is definitely the ability to be curious and to adapt. Where I see the most successful organizations are those that have a curious to adapt to technology, and also those organizations that are willing to work with a cultural perspective within the people organization. Because it's a mindset perspective more than a technology perspective, I would say. We have the technology, and if we speak about interoperability, digital resilience, sovereignty and capability, in my perspective, that is equal to adapt. We need to move fast and we need to adapt. And even the technology is moving so fast that all these big and smaller companies that have a lot of powerful solutions, they are continuously developing new solutions all the time. So if we don't keep up with that, we will always be behind as a civil society and as a nation. So from my perspective, I would say adaptation is the key factor here.
Perfect transition to the next question, my friend. That's actually what we're going into now. Because if we look at modern warfare, software needs to be updated in days, or even hours, to counter for new threats. Yet defense procurement programs and security compliance are historically slow. And the processes are quite rigid, with all respect. How do we shift from a mindset building fixed, unchangeable systems to build adaptive platforms without introducing catastrophic vulnerabilities? I start with you, Manfred.
Thank you for the question, Mattias. So at NATO, we've got a couple of different things that we've started over the last few years. So one is Diana, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, and that is an incubator that is an entity within NATO that's kept relatively separate to preserve the speed and the independence and to work on the development of dual-use technologies. So it is companies, entrepreneurs that have a really, really good idea that come to Diana and then that get funding from NATO to develop these technologies that can be used in the civil as well as in the military context. So that is one thing that we do that tremendously speeds up the development that is much needed. The standard purchasing cycle at NATO is nothing that we're very proud of as far as the length is concerned. We have an average procurement time from the moment you have an idea to the moment you have a signed contract in hand of 4 years. And that is very, very long because there's 32 nations that are involved and they need to approve it. And they also have a little bit at times a national interest because they've got national industries and they also want to get a slice of that pie. And so for technology, one of the things that I was able to do is to have an agile procurement cycle, a dynamic sourcing cycle where we co-create requirements together with industry and really get the expertise from industry into that requirement definition process. And then we cut down the cycle from those 4 years for kind of standard international competitive bidding to a period of 7 months, which is much faster, but it's still not fast enough. So there is still ongoing things that as an international organization, an intergovernmental organization, we're just, it's a constant need to push for faster procurement processes.
Thank you. Handing over to you, Thomas. If your point on this view, I mean, we talk about rapid adaptation versus strict compliance, I would say in a nutshell here. So if you think about that topic, what's your reflection?
Well, I think time and speed is of essence, because and it's always, and I think it always have been a battle of who could run in the short circle, because then you will have an advantage against your opponent. Then you could take a quicker decision, and if you're in the business or military, that's quite important. So the OODA loop, to be quicker than your opponent. That's important. So time, and now we talk real time or very, very, very close to real time. To give you one example, if you spend a lot of money on buying very advanced weapon system that could have a long-range fire, that could be a missile on the Gripen aircraft, that could be on one of the new coming frigates, that could be any kind of weapon system. That could be a drone, like we see from Ukraine. You need also to know what you would like to hit. So maybe you have a fixed target. You know that building is annoying you. There is something that you would like. but it's also the dynamic on the battlefield. Things are moving. And then you need to be very quick to find where your target is, send the information to the missile or the shooter, and then you hit it. So that's my point is, so it's all about data, and it's in real time, you have to process it. That means if you're not digitalized, you're lost. You could stay out of a battle. You don't even have to go to the battlefield, because you will lose. So this is not only on the battlefield, to put it in extreme, because it could be another situation. So it's about data. And now we are, in our society, coming up with system that will produce enormous amount of data. You will drown in data, and you have to organize your data in a way. So one guy told me, it's not the person who will be the best collector of books, physical books, to have it in boxes in your backyard. That's no good. The winner is the guys who have a lot of books organized in a library and know exactly where to find the information. So using that metaphor, this is how you have to organize, and that you have digitalized solution, you have artificial intelligence, all of that you need to have. So I think this is what you have. Compliance to an old book of rules is a waste of time, because that book, that kind of mindset rules, they are probably written in a time when I have my secrets, the information I would like to protect, on a piece of paper. I lock it into my safety in my office, but it's in a building where they're guarded by armored guard and have a security solution. And if I share my information, I have a list, so I know exactly who have seen that information. Well, that's unfortunately not good enough to have. So you have to, of course, you have to have a set of rules, but it have to be set up to handle the situation we are now, I would say, already within, and there will be more to come. So that is. So my answer will be, you should be compliant to that. But if you lose your idea and think, oh, I will be compliant to full security, you could stay at home, because then you have no use, and you should spend your money on something else, the lottery, because you shouldn't invest in digital solutions.
But this is still setting up boundaries for a lot of Swedish agencies, regions, municipalities, etc. When they want to initiate and start these projects, they are, looking at these boundaries coming from the legislation, let's say that, and the old legislation. How do we challenge it? Here, perhaps. I mean, Almedalen is a place to do it, but and listen to people like you, Thomas.
I think in the system we have chosen together, how we would like to set up our society, it's not people like me in uniform who form the legislation. Luckily, we have a parliament where we elect people, and they have the task to set up. That's a long time to change a lot. But I think there is something set in movement, so you have to look on that. And I think when I'm listening to the government and political level, that is accepted. Also EU and other organizations. But it take a long time. So what could we do? We couldn't sit and wait for things to change. We have to try to work within the boundaries we have. And I will argue and challenge whoever and say there is ways to navigate through today's jungle. I have quite a lot of examples. And so I think if you hire the right kind of people with the right mindset, you have a leadership that allow people to sometimes hit the wall, help them up, set them new course, all of that. So I think this is how we have to work it. But if we are losing our operation, whatever kind of activities we are doing, if we are losing the focus on what we would like to achieve, then we are lost. So we have to have it, and of course we have boundaries, or else I don't know what that kind of society is called, but in some ways it's run of people like me in uniform.
Thank you for that. Handing over to Chris, rapid adaptation versus strict compliance, coming into what you are doing now in the UK.
Yeah, I think there's certainly room for both. I don't think you can have one without the other. I think there needs to be mechanisms to allow rapid adaptation, but also to make sure that there is compliance as well. In the UK, we have an organisation called the Police Digital Service, and individual forces can bid in for doing innovation type work, and that work is done in isolation. It's done with very strict guardrails, and once it's proven out, it's then controlled in terms of compliance and its reach into the wider policing community. Good examples, I guess, of that are we developed in the UK a project called Victim Journey. Victim Journey was an idea, and the idea was essentially, if we keep members of the public proactively up to date on the life of their crime investigation, will they ring us less to ask for updates and reduce our demand? And actually, will their satisfaction levels go up because they feel like we care? And we've got real issues in the UK around trust and legitimacy in policing. And we did that in one force, it was in my force, and that's now rapidly expanding across the entirety of policing in the UK. Bobby's another good example, I'm sure we'll get onto that. Yep. But the proof of concept around victim journey led the British Home Office to then come to policing and say, well, that's brilliant, but wouldn't it be fantastic if every citizen had an account and a portal that they could log into to interact with every police force in the same way? So if I've had a crime in London, but I've also had an incident in York, for example, that I would see both of them in the same place and I could interact with the investigating officers through that single platform. And that development was also done in partnership with our colleagues at Salesforce and is now rolling out into a national portal project, having gone through the relevant compliance, etc. But there are challenges in that rapid adaptation in that the national product is different to what the portal product that we developed as a pilot looks like. So I'm now faced with the challenge of how do I migrate all of these citizens away from this local concept and onto this national product that looks very, very different. So there is room for both. It enables things to move forward and move forward at pace, but it does come with challenges. And you need people that are willing to take a little bit of risk in procurement, a little bit of risk in the technical side, a little bit of risk with the data. But nothing good comes from sitting on your hands and doing nothing.
Exactly. Then we just stand still, with all respect, and we need to develop on this one. You partly came into my follow-up question connected to this, but before we do that, Miran, do you have any say in connection to the rapid adaptation versus the strict compliance?
Yeah, definitely. Interesting to hear what Thomas, Manfred, and Chris are pointing out here, and I would also say that as a perspective to that question is definitely to look at the data. And of course, this is being done in Sweden and other countries, but to start to see data not just as a whole, but we need to start differentiating what data are we actually talking about. What data is confidential, what is non-confidential, what is secret, etc., etc. So I think civil society as a whole and a country need to work with that question even more to increase adaptation, but also to be more compliance, because you could do a whole lot of stuff with non-confidential data as well. And of course, all data, depending on how it's used, could also be confidential, of course, if you put them together and started to take action on those. But my point is, I think we need to see data not as a whole, but to start to differentiate it and to understand how to work with it, because that could definitely speed up the adaptation and also the action around it.
Thank you, Miran. Coming back to you, Chris, and speaking a bit more about the human element and the AI responsibilities. And I mean, you've been working now in the British Police for some years, and it's emphasizing using AI to free up staff so they can focus on tasks requiring judgment and empathy. And Manfred, I mean, as military tech pushes closer to autonomous systems, where do we draw the hard digital line? How do we scale our capabilities with automation and AI while we're keeping the human accountable and keep them at the center? How do we do this? I turn to both of you guys.
Right. So it's a very tricky bridge to build. Right. It's almost like you're a gymnast and you're trying to build a bridge from one side to the other, and it is really hard because there is still a lot of unknowns in AI. There's a lot of dangers in AI, and it really requires very, very tight guardrails. And then sometimes even when you put down those guardrails, there are still issues that occur with AI. So I'm a big proponent of having the human in the loop. And especially when you look at military applications or where human lives are concerned, the human needs to be in the loop. It needs to be the ultimate decision makers. But once you have a human in the loop, the human is going to have human speed, which means not as fast as the machine. And with that, you're not really executing the processes as fast as you could. So we got to be also judicial about having a human in the loop, because sometimes human oversight doesn't mean that the human is actually in the decision-making pathway, but is overseeing the decision-making pathway and is kind of managing by exception, kind of looking at the overall performance of the system and if some tweaks will have to be made. But it's a tricky situation as far as how much a human will be in the loop in those applications.
So you talk a bit about the auditing piece here. We're going to be auditors, all of us, pretty much moving forward. If we hand over more and more to AI to actually solve part of the work that we do today. Interesting. Chris, if you want to comment on the topic as well. I mean, you partly mentioned it in your previous answer, but coming back to what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I'll get onto the kind of the Bobby stuff in a second. But AI is a really interesting thing, isn't it? Because everybody's just, what is AI doing for us? And we're in this kind of curve of understanding, I think, with AI. And the first time that I experienced that was probably back in the 80s when my mum brought a microwave oven home. And she tried to cook a chicken in it. And it was terrible. Then she tried to bake a pie in it, and it was terrible. And everybody's looking at this box in the kitchen thinking, what is the point of this box? But she had to have one because everybody had one. And eventually she figured out it was okay for reheating meals, right? And we're kind of not quite at that bit where we've discovered what it's good for, in my mind, and we will get to that point. So we need to keep testing, and we need to keep auditing, and we need to make sure we've got really tight guardrails in place when we're testing what it does. And in the UK, we worked with another police force in collaboration to essentially test the idea that we could put an agentic AI agent out online, live with the public, for them to ask questions of the police. Okay, and that comes with some significant nervousness, some significant risk. But luckily for me, there are other people also in British policing that are quite willing to try something a little bit different, as long as we've done the due diligence, the testing, and the guardrails are in place. And we can explain it. So we did. And Bobby sits on our website and has essentially entirely replaced my digital team in my command and control centre. Bobby answers successfully 80-ish% of all of the questions it's given without the need to pass it to a human. And we do spend an awful lot of time auditing to make sure the answers are correct. But not only are they correct, they're consistent. You know, if I walk into a briefing room on a morning and ask 10 police officers the same question, I get 10 different answers. You know, what Bobby does is give us consistency and clarity. And in British policing, 20 years ago, we used to send a police officer to about 90% of our calls for service. Today, it's around 20%. Not because we don't send people that we should be sending, but because the public's expectations of what we should be there to do has changed. And Bobby's dealing with that kind of 80% that really shouldn't be coming into policing, strictly speaking. So it's a real success story of how AI works.
Amazing.
You know, there's other use cases for AI as well, where it is augmented with the agent, where it is making decisions and doing the research, which means the agent can have a really, really good, meaningful, impactive conversation with the citizen, without having to concentrate on navigating numerous systems. But ultimately, the decision is theirs. They have to check, they have to make sure they're happy and make the decision. But will AI do it all in the future? Possibly, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
We'll see. Who knows? Thomas, maybe you want to comment on this as well.
Well, just I think this the man in the loop, and I think that is a discussion that will be around for a while. We talk man in the loop or man on the loop. I think there is a lot of moral and ethical thing, especially if you talk about, for example, police, military, who have a mandate to use lethal violence. But just to tell you a story, you could go to the event of Saab, the fighter aircraft manufacturer. You can check on them if it's true, if you don't believe me. But you know, when that discussion were on, there were some designers making a new fighter aircraft. There was all the pilots in the Air Force were screaming, we have to have manned aircraft system. The technology said you could have unmanned. So the compromise was that they would have a seat for the pilot, and then there was a very small little stool on the side in the cockpit. So all the pilots from the Air Force were coming to see this new design and say, oh, great cockpit, and what's that? Oh, that's for the dog. The dog? Why on earth should we bring a dog on our mission? Well, you know, you will be instructed, don't even think about touching anything in the cockpit. And we will train the dog to bite you if you try to hit anything. So you can check if that's true, but I think this is a discussion of manned or unmanned. But my point is talking about the risk. I think, as I said before, if time is of essence in our processes, digitalization, AI will support us. But that also means that we have to have some kind of classification. We talk what we have in the military. Of course, there is some information, there are some data points that we would like not to be shared with the enemy, because that could mean, for example, that the enemy know where I am and he could shoot at me. But there is a ton of information we don't need to classify the way we do today. And that is something you could live in if you have a non-digitalized system. You could afford to have this mindset, but you can't have it if you're going fully digitalized, because that means if you classified your information, you will end up with very expensive, complicated system with a lot of risk avoiding to handle that kind of information. So you have to think about another example, and this is from the real world. If you have, for example, a system that point out a position on aircraft, a friendly aircraft, in the common air picture, that is something that you don't like to tell your enemy. But after, I would assume, some 10 minutes, that old position is invalid. It's not a threat to send out that. But if you have your system that you have to protect that every single position for years, you will have to end up with very troubling system. So this is how we have to twist our mindset, or else we will be in deep, deep problem. I normally say, and this is a metaphor, if you look on digitalization, it's like a coin. So you have to carry along that coin with you. The coin have a front side. That's all the positive things what you could do with a digital solution. But there is a back side of that. And that is vulnerabilities. Someone tried to exploit. Someone tried to use it to get into your system. And that's a problem. But you can't decide, oh, I'm going digitalized. I don't give a damn about the vulnerabilities. Or I only think about the vulnerabilities. Nothing. So you have to stay mission focused, but don't forget, there is a backside.
It is a backside. So we need to take that with us, of course. Gentlemen, we are getting close to the end of this session. But before we end, to wrap this up, I have pointed down some words here. But in one sentence, what's the single biggest cultural mental shift required by leaders today to achieve true digital resilience? Should I repeat it? Yeah, Thomas?
I would say bravery.
Bravery. Manfred?
Knowing when to enable technology and when to let loose. So our interaction with technology is the issue. More than one word, but still it's the issue.
Yeah. And Chris?
I'm also going to take a liberty and use more than one word. For me, it's around changing the people, changing the people's mindset, changing their muscle memory is much, much harder than achieving digital enablement. You will find people easily that are willing to do the digital work. changing the masses in terms of their mindset is the difficult bit.
And Miran.
I would say not to search for perfection, rather to take action.
Goes a bit hand in hand with bravery. We need to go out and test, but bring that coin, because we know that it might come with some consequences. Ladies and gentlemen, give a big applause to the panel. Thank you very much for contributing today.
Thank you.
And that's it, Lent.
All right.
Thank you. Yes. Big thank you. Yes.